2005 year. A small storage room stands in the middle of the forest. A lamp on the ceiling illuminates the room. A girl in a headscarf is looking for something on a shelf among cans and dishes. The front door opens slightly. The girl with dark hair and eyes continued her search. She didn't understand why she couldn't find the thing she'd definitely put there. The dark-haired woman touched the stacked plates with her hand. The plates fell noisily to the floor. One plate rolled on the floor. The plate fell at the feet of the unknown person. A brown-gloved hand lifted the plate. The girl turned around and saw a man approaching her. The unknown person handed her a plate. The nun looked at him with fear and asked who he was. The fear disappeared from her face when she saw the plate. The unknown person handed the plate to the girl and she thanked him. She did not have time to ask the guest what he was doing here. The hooded man suddenly approached her. Her pupils constricted. The gloved hand stuck something into the nun's neck. Blood sprayed from the wound. The killer took out the murder weapon with the remains of the victim's blood. Blood dripped from the bloody blade. The killer asked if the girl was interested in what he was doing here. He squatted down, holding his weapon, and asked if she knew. The nun held her hand to the wound. Her clothes were stained with blood and her face was pale. The killer's smile was visible from under the hood. He said he came to kill the girl. The Catholic cross was covered in blood. The girl was killed with red-handled scissors. There was a sticker on the handle with the name Young Sun Woo. A week ago, Paradise Elementary School is illuminated by the sun. Office 4-1. The student drew a portrait of a girl. The teacher asked a student named Sun Woo if his sister was the person he was most grateful to. The red-haired teacher with glasses looked at the boy with brown hair with a smile. She asked why he didn't draw the pupils. Sun Woo was embarrassed by what his deskmate said. The girl looked at the teacher and said that he always draws strange things. The boy looked displeased at his neighbor at his desk. The woman took the guy's album and asked if he would let him see his other drawings. Sun Woo grabbed the album with both hands and replied that he didn't want to. The girl turned to the other students and said that the guy said he didn't want to. Two classmates grabbed Sun Woo's hands and shouted that the teacher said she wanted to watch. The girl took her neighbor's album and started leafing through it. She found something. She showed the teacher Sun Woo's drawings and told her to look at it. Fear appeared in the teacher's eyes. A drop of sweat ran down her. She looked at the drawing of a headless rabbit. Blood sprayed from the animal's body. The woman looked at the drawing with disgust. Sun Woo spoke. He asked to be released. The guy tried to escape from the grip of his classmates. The student asked to remove his hands. Consulting office. The teacher sat in front of a girl wearing a headscarf. The woman looked at the student's drawing. She reported that Sun Woo said that he drew it based on his imagination. The teacher added that they say someone killed a rabbit and threw the corpse in the garden behind the school, and the security guard confirmed that this was not fiction. The man noticed the animal behind a tree. He took a closer look at what he saw. A headless rabbit lay on the ground. The man got scared and clenched his teeth. The woman continued her story. She raised her hand with her fingers sticking out and said that the guard was sure that in Sun Woo's drawing the corpse of a rabbit was obviously copied from a real one. The nun looked at the woman. She said that the boy says otherwise and she knows that he is a little unusual boy, but not a bad one. She added that he simply draws what he feels or sees, something she has noticed over the past 2 years. A cruel drawing lay on the table. Outside the window, children were playing football. The teacher replied that the girl's words sounded like she was covering for Sun Woo, and added that children commit cruel acts behind adults' backs. The children were still playing with the ball, and the woman continued to talk. She said that since Sun Woo is studying under the program of the Nazareth Orphanage, founded by the director of the Paradise organization himself, she will not make a problem out of it. But only for now. The teacher yawned and covered her mouth with her hand. She said that the director probably doesn't want to fuss around the school. Besides, just because of problems with some orphan. And she hopes that it's just a stupid picture. The woman turned her gaze to the nun and asked if she knew that she was growing up from children who abused animals. The girl looked at her with a serious look. The teacher hopes that the chairman of the board will look after the boy. Garbage. The boy was digging in the trash. The children looked at him from the side. One of the boys said that Sun Woo had gone completely crazy. The second suggested that he would probably stink again and laughed. The children filmed the guy with their phone cameras and laughed. They called him the beggar of Nazareth. The girl held the phone in her hands and took a photo of Sun Woo. She said that she would need to send it to the whole school tomorrow. The trash bag contained colored pencils and markers. The guy looked joyfully at what he was looking for. In his hands he held a green felt tip pen with a sticker with the name Young Sun Woo. The guy was called by name. He turned around and looked at the children, recognizing the nun's voice. The children ran in different directions when the girl approached them and ordered them to disappear. She sighed with her eyes closed. The girl stood next to Sun Woo, who was putting things into a backpack. She asked if the children had thrown all his things into the trash again. The boy took out a blue pencil case from his backpack. He opened it and put a marker inside. Dirty Sun Wu looked at his things and replied that nothing bad happened since he found everything. The nun and the schoolboy walked together. The girl said that next time she would buy him new things so that he would not rummage through the trash. The guy replied that it was not necessary. The girl looked at the guy with narrowed eyes. A bead of sweat ran down her cheek. She said that the child is very stubborn. Sun Wu walked and did not look at her. He said his sister bought them for him as a gift. The guy squeezed the strap of his backpack and looked at his feet. He said that these things were his and he would never allow himself to lose them. Song Wu added that he would protect them with his life. The girl put her hand on the guy's head and ruffled his hair. She asked if he would risk his life for a pen. They approached the brick Nazareth church. The boy said that these things are really all he has. The nun and Sun Wu entered the grounds of the Nazareth orphanage. The girl said that the director knew that the boy was called to the consultation room. They walked through the territory of the shelter. A worker walked near them wearing an orange vest with the word Nazareth written on it. The eldest said that she would talk to the director. The boy said that he would clean the church tomorrow morning. The girl lowered her head and looked at Sun Wu. The boy looked up at her and said that he would not swear when other people are around. The nun closed her eyes, smiled and said that he was great. Sun Wu looked at the girl's big dark eyes. He didn't understand why he couldn't draw those eyes. The guy looked at her without looking away. The boy was sweeping the red carpet in the church with a broom. Several people entered the red doors. The guys sat on the bench. A plump boy in a red t-shirt was holding a magazine in his hand. He asked his friends if they wanted to watch. The boys looked at the contents of the magazine with red faces. Sun Wu looked at what they were doing. He was frightened by what he saw. His eyes opened wide. The boy's shadow covered the guy in the red t-shirt. He looked at Sun Wu and asked him what he wanted. The boy snatched the magazine from the full man's hands. Sun Wu tore the magazine. The blushing guy looked at this with his mouth open. He called the hero a brat and grabbed him by the t-shirt. The fat guy sat on Sun Wu and raised his fist to hit him. The boy asked what he was doing. The enemy replied that he would have to pay for the magazine if he wanted to live. Sun Wu covered himself with his hands. There were many abrasions on his body. He told the guy not to touch his thing. The overweight guy looked angrily at the hero, raising his fist. He asked what he was talking about and called Sun Wu crazy. The doors to the room opened. The nun stood behind them. She spread her arms and asked what was going on here. The girl looked at Sun Wu in fear and called him by name. The guy in the red t-shirt turned around and gritted his teeth. The guys began to run away, and the employees tried to catch up with them. One of them asked what they did with Sun Wu. The beaten boy began to collect scraps of paper. The nun leaned over to the hero and told him to let him see her face. She looked at Sun Wu's face in fear. One of the boy's eyes was closed and blood was flowing from his nose. The girl said that she would take him to the hospital. An employee in a white t-shirt was collecting scraps of a magazine. She looked at the piece of paper embarrassed and blushed. She was holding in her hands a piece of paper with a picture of a girl in her underwear. She turned to Sister Mary. Sun Wu's face was covered in bandages and there was a bandage on his cheek. The boy looked out the car window. Sister Maria was driving. Both were silent. The girl held the steering wheel with both hands and watched the road. She said that she had a lot of questions for Sun Wu. She asked if he would tell him what happened. The boy replied that he did not buy that magazine. The sister remembered the hero when he covered himself with his hands. She reminded Sun Wu that he then said not to touch his thing. The hero was picking at his nails. There were bandages on his hands too. He was silent. Maria's hands held the steering wheel tightly. She asked Sun Wu about the rabbit he was drawing. She wanted to ask if he did anything with him, but didn't finish. The boy turned to her with one eye open. He wanted her to finish her question. The girl turned to him and asked if he would like to attend counseling the following week. She also asked if he wanted to know why he kept drawing things like this. Sun Wu looked down. He couldn't say what he wanted. The boy asked if his sister also doubted him. Maria and Sun Wu got out of the parked car. He asked if the nun thought he killed everything he painted. The boy was offended, turned around and left the girl. She shouted after him that everything was wrong. The schoolboy left. He kept his hands in his pockets. Maria said that if he doesn't want to go, then he doesn't have to. She looked at the guy sadly. The girl asked Sun Wu to instead tell her what happened in the church and where that rabbit drawing came from. Sun Wu turned around and looked at her. He replied that he would think about it and could not promise anything. There was a dark night sky above the small barn. The boy grabbed the door handle. He entered a dark room. In his head were the last words he said to Sister Mary. The door opened slightly. A blue light fell on Sun Wu's eye. He stood there, breathing heavily. The hero turned to the light. In his hand were bloody scissors. There was blood on his cheek. The animal cage was open. White rabbits ate grass. An unknown person in a hood was watching the animals. He watched from the bushes. His eyes appeared red in the shadows. The rabbits noticed the guest. The rabbit quickly ran away from the man. He reached his hand towards the stone. The rabbit stopped and began to look around. The animal turned its head in different directions. A stone flew out of the bushes. The rabbit flew away from the stone that hit him. An unknown person in a hood approached the wounded animal. He heard that nearby someone was telling Sister Maria that he would help with something. The killer looked at the nun who was carrying a stepladder. A shelter employee ran after her. The woman also took the stepladder and looked at the girl. Maria looked at the woman with a smile on her face. The employee said that my sister would break her back like that. The sister replied that it was not hard for her. The unknown man smiled. He went into the bush. He dragged the rabbit behind him with a rope. Sun Wu lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling. He recalled yesterday's conversation with Sister Maria. The boy got out of bed. His feet didn't reach the floor. Sun Wu looked at something. There were various things hanging on the wall and backpacks on the floor. The hero took his trousers. From his pocket he took out a folded piece of paper. The boy opened the paper. On it there was an image of a girl in a swimsuit and a pasted image of Sister Maria's face. Sun Wu remembered that he was told that if he violated his sister's image again, he would be in trouble. The boy tore off the pasted photo with his fingers. He put the image in his box. The box contained other photographs from the child's life. Sun Wu picked up another photo and looked at it. He thought that Sister Maria and He Young were very dear to him and he would not allow anyone to lay a finger on them. In the photo, Sister Maria, Sun Wu, and He Young were sitting on a park bench. The wooden gazebo is covered with plants. The children sat at a table on which there were pencils, paper, markers, and more. Sun Wu was drawing something. He Young realized that there was a cat in the drawing and was delighted. The hero drew a cat with a simple pencil. Sister Maria called the children. The girl turned to Maria. They waved to each other. The girl looked at the children and stroked He Young's head. Maria said that the girl was lucky because there was someone who drew kittens for her. The boy looked at his drawings. The nun put her hand next to the hero and looked at him. She asked if he was still upset. The girl added that she does not doubt him and is simply worried about her. She called him a fool. Sun Wu didn't look at her. He asked why he was stupid. Maria closed her eyes, leaned towards the children and said that if he was able to argue with her, it looked like he would be back to normal soon. She asked the girl if this was so. He Young agreed. The girl waved her hand to the children and said that she would then go to prepare for the prayer service. She said goodbye to them. Sun Wu called his sister and asked if they would have an Easter egg hunt this year, in which only the three of them would participate. The guy looked at the nun with wide open eyes. She answered positively. The Nazareth church stood in the sunshine. He Young looked at the hero with embarrassment. She was shaking and sweat was running down her face. She told the hero that she peed herself. Sun Wu put the pencil on the drawing paper and called the girl to change the diaper. The boy carried He Young in his arms. They left all the office supplies on the table. The killer's gloved hand reached for the scissors. He Young's eyes were closing. The girl fell asleep. Sun Wu read her a story. The boy was sitting and holding a book. The girl leaned on one hand and closed her eyes. The hero continued to read, but his gaze was directed at He Young. The nuns watched them from the side. The woman in brown clothes called the guy carrying. Sister Maria looked at the children, and the woman standing nearby closed her eyes. She asked if the girl remembered who was the first one He Young accepted from the moment she got to Nazareth. The girl smiled. She said that it was Sun Wu. She heard that He Young even hung on him at the main gate of the orphanage. Maria's interlocutor stood with her eyes also closed. There was a smile on her face. She said that the girl has since become very attached to the hero and everyone thinks that they are real brother and sister. Maria replied that they are more than relatives and Sun Wu only cares about her. He Young was sleeping on the pillow. Her mouth was open. The nun asked what they would do since He Young was going to be adopted soon. Maria turned to the woman and raised her hand. The nun said that these people could not forget the girl after seeing her several times during volunteer work. They said that they would come to prayer service this Easter. The nun turned to Sister Mary. The smile disappeared from the girl's face. She said it was great. The woman added that this is good for He Young. The nuns began to look out the window again. The woman said that she was worried about how Song Wu would react to this. Maria said that she would try to talk to him. The boy's gaze was embittered. He said that he would not let the girl be taken away since she was his sister. Sun Wu ran away from Sister Maria. She only managed to call him by name. The guy thought that he would never give He Young up because she was his. A few days later, everyone decorated the church. There were many red and white flowers in the room. The children ran after each other. Maria tried to hold on to all the things that the children might drop. She told them to stop running around here. The girl invited them to run with them. An unknown man in a hood peeked out from around the corner. He stood and watched as people prepared for the holiday. The nun was giving instructions to one of the sisters. Maria noticed something. She looked at the children and the orphanage workers, not understanding what was happening. Her face was serious and worried. She wondered what it was. She felt as if someone was looking at her. A nun in brown clothes approached Sister Mary. The girl turned sharply to her. The woman asked how Sun Wu reacted to the news about He Young. The smile disappeared from the nun's face. Maria said that it was very difficult for the hero to accept that He Young would be adopted. The woman sighed and said that this was what she expected, but this did not solve the problem. The girl said she would talk to the boy again and try to help him prepare for this. Sun Woo held the sleeping Hee-young in his arms. He walked up to the bed and saw a folded piece of paper on it. He took the piece of paper. The letter contained an invitation to watch the Easter full moon. Sister Maria invited the guy to watch the Easter full moon together, just like last year. The boy ran through the corridors of the orphanage. He walked up to the barn and reached for the doorknob. The hero's foot entered the room. He asked where they would go this year. Sun Woo walked on. He said that the girl did not try to use this to appease him. The boy said that he would never agree to adopt Hee-young. Bloody legs could be seen from the darkness. Sun Woo pulled his hand. Sweat appeared on his face. Sister Maria sat with scissors in her neck. The boy grabbed the girl and began to shake her. He told her to wake up. Sun Woo looked at his hands. They were covered in blood. The hero did not understand what it was. The boy approached Maria's dead face. His mouth was open in fear. He thought about how they were going to look at the moon together. He didn't understand why this happened. Something caught the guy's attention. He saw his scissors in the girl's neck. The boy looked at the scissors and did not understand why they were there. A man with a flashlight walked through the garden at night. A guy in military uniform walked through the garden. There was fear on his face. The guard's uniform had the name Gang and Chial written on it. He was afraid of intense darkness. The boy heard someone calling his sister Maria outside. He got scared. Sun Woo began to turn his head in different directions. He looked at the scissors. The hero understood that they should not be here. He grabbed the scissors. With one sharp movement, the guy tore the scissors out of the girl's neck. Blood splashed on him. Because of the blood on his face, he closed one eye. Inchul walked into the barn and asked Sister Maria if she was there. The guard saw Sun Woo. The boy was looking at him, holding the nun's murder weapon. The man saw scissors in the guy's bloody hand. Sweat ran down the guard's face. Somehow he could call his sister Maria. He turned angrily towards Sun Woo, calling him a worm. The guard with red eyes shouted at the guy. He asked what he had done. Police, doctors, and reporters arrived at the crime scene. The man ordered the people with the cameras to step back. Journalists asked whether the criminal had been caught and whether it was one of the employees. Sister Maria's body was covered with a black tarpaulin. A man with short hair looked at the corpse. 2 forensic experts entered the barn. They held suitcases with everything they needed for work. The detective said that he had seen this for the first time in all his time working in this city. The masked man put on gloves. He asked if the guy who found the body was standing outside. The detective turned his gaze and asked if this was the guy. He looked at Sun Woo, who had a policeman and a nun standing behind him. The man turned to his subordinate. He stood there with his eyes wide open after what the man said. He said that the boy is the main and only suspect in this murder. The masked man didn't believe it. The medical examiner closed his eyes. The detective tapped him on the shoulder and said they would see each other at the station. The man wished his subordinate a good job. The detective went outside and screamed and saliva flew from his mouth. He asked if the police had gotten rid of the reporters. They answered him positively and told him he could go. He approached the director of the orphanage and said that he would take Sun Woo to the police station. The woman looked sadly at the man and asked him to take care of the boy. Sun Woo looked at the sky. The detective looked where the boy was looking and asked what he was looking at. They were looking at the full moon. The man turned his gaze to the hero. He looked sternly at the boy and said that he would now take him to the police department and they would talk. The detective asked him to answer honestly. The man stood up but turned around when Sun Woo started speaking. The boy with blood on his cheek looked at the detective. He asked if the man would believe him if he told him the truth. 1 week later, a reporter with a microphone stood at the entrance to the Nazareth orphanage. He stated that the murder victim was a young nun from the Nazareth church. He added that what is more scary is that a 10-year-old orphan, whom the girl cared for the most, is suspected of murder. The man said the suspect in the case refused to admit guilt, causing public outrage. Police department. The gloomy detective sat on a chair and looked at Sun Woo, who was sitting opposite. The second detective stood against the wall. The boy said that the task of the police is to find out who is responsible for what happened. The man clenched his teeth. He said it was true. He said that he would now tell what the police managed to discover. They took all the fingerprints that were in that storeroom and compared them with the fingerprints of all the employees and students. The man added that this closet was very rarely used, so there weren't that many prints on the doorknob. Sun Woo looked at the detective worriedly. The hand reached for the doorknob. The man said that in fact there were only Sun Woo's prints on the pen, and the witness also confirmed that he saw the guy. The detective spoke with one of the shelter employees. The boy assumed that the witness was the guy in uniform who found him. The detective still looked at the guy angrily. There was fear on the guy's face. The man said that the angle of the scissor strike on the nun's body corresponded to a person of the hero's height. The detective showed Sun Woo a drawing of a headless rabbit and suggested that the guy had been having a hard time lately. He asked if the boy killed the rabbit for the same reason. Sun-woo looked at the detective. He shouted that he didn't do it and he already said that it wasn't him who killed the rabbit. The director of the orphanage stood outside the interrogation room with her hands folded together. She prayed. Sun-woo asked why they didn't believe him. The tired detective abruptly left the room. The man approached the nun. She looked at him sadly. The detective asked her to talk to Sun-woo since the evidence is too obvious and the guy will not be able to escape punishment. The man added that if he refuses to admit guilt, this will affect the verdict. He also said that since Sun-woo is a minor, no criminal charges will be brought against him and either the boy knows this or he just doesn't care. The man, gritting his teeth, looked at the director of the shelter. He suggested that Sun-woo is a very smart guy, but he doesn't understand why he is stubborn. But in any case, he is an employee and his capabilities are limited. The woman with a sad face listened to everything the police officer said. She asked the detective if the real killer might have escaped. She said that she couldn't believe Sun-woo did this since he's not that kind of kid. The man looked at the woman angrily and said that he understood her feelings, but the evidence suggests otherwise and he definitely did it. People were watching a news report on TV. The red-haired teacher from the orphanage stood with her back to the camera and spoke. She said that about a week before the incident, one of the rabbits that was raised in the shelter died, and in the boys' album they found a very realistic drawing of a dead rabbit, as if drawn from life. The woman's face was not visible. She suggested that the boy himself killed the rabbit to draw. She added that, as a rule, children are afraid of animal corpses, so they do not approach them. She threw up her hands and said it was terrible and she should have looked after him better. As a teacher, the woman felt responsible for what happened. A few days later, juvenile court. The court decided to take the suspect into custody on the basis of the law on the protection of minors. Juvenile experts conduct a psychological examination of the suspect. The man with glasses looked at the guy's drawing. He asked Sun-woo if it was true that he was very good at drawing. There were drawings of dead animals on the table. The man asked if this scared the child. He replied that he was not scared. The man asked why the boy was drawing this. Little Sun-woo squatted alone. A woman in a purple scarf approached the hero and said that it was already cold, and then asked what he was doing. Sun-woo said that the children didn't want to play with him, but the dead don't run away and stay with him and don't hurt him, so he feels comfortable with them. The woman saw that the baby was looking at the dead dove. The bird lay in a pool of its own blood. She jumped to the side, grabbed her chest and screamed. Sun-woo turned his head towards her. He reached out. The boy stroked the bird's corpse. A smile appeared on the baby's face. Sun-woo looked at the man with glasses with a serious face. He asked if they thought the drawings were related to the murder of Sister Maria. The man replied that this was not necessary. He put 2 fingers on a piece of paper and invited the hero to try a test that would help him better understand the boy. Sun-woo looked at the man. There was no emotion on his face. He thought that if Sister Mary had been here, everything would have been different. Meeting room. The director of the orphanage came to Sun-woo to talk to him. They sat opposite each other. The woman asked how the boy lived here and asked him to tell her everything he did today. Sun-woo replied that he took the test. Concern appeared on the woman's face. She asked what test the boy took. The hero looked down. He replied that he took the test so that he would be better understood. The nun placed both hands on Sun-woo's arm and said that she believed him. The boy looked up at the woman and asked if she really believed him. She looked at the guy sadly. Her eyes were only slightly open. She replied that she really believed him. The nun removed her hands from Song-woo's hand. She said that the policeman said that the guy could not avoid punishment, and if he confessed and repented, the punishment would be reduced. She added that, fortunately, the hero is a minor, so no criminal charges will be filed, so she will tell the detective that Sun-woo confessed everything to her. The boy hit the table with his fist and screamed. He asked the nun not to do this. The woman said that she really acted stupidly, because she said that she believed the boy. She apologized to him. The hero looked away and started looking somewhere down again. The boy remembered how he approached the pantry. The director asked if he noticed anything strange about her. She also asked if the guy saw anyone else that day, because someone did. Sun-woo's eyes widened. His head was bowed. He said that when he arrived, there was no one there. The boy grabbed his head and said he had no idea how it happened. There was a water cooler next to the window. The nun said it must be difficult for the guy, but he doesn't have time anymore. She said that when all this was over, the guy would need to return to Nazareth. The woman told him to take care of himself. The woman was on her way out. She remembered something. The director turned around and looked at the guy. She said it was about Hee-young. The woman said that the girl was taken into a good family. The guy raised his head in horror and opened his mouth. He put his hands on the table and asked where she was going. The woman stood in front of the door. She said she couldn't tell him that. Then the boy asked if he could see her one last time. The woman looked at the guy seriously. She said it would be difficult to arrange this now. The director suggested that the guy focus on his trial. Crime Classification Office. Sun Woo's voice could be heard from behind the door. He asked to meet the girl just once and said that he would come back right away. He said that he would return and not run away. Two men forcibly pulled the hero out of the office. He fought back and asked to let him go, since he just wants to see his little sister. The men held Sun Woo's hands. The boy kicked and screamed that he had already said that he would not do anything. He asked to be released and let him go. The journalist said that the juvenile offender who committed the murder of a nun in the city of Huan would soon be sentenced. The news reported that the recently released results of a psychological examination of the suspect have sparked heated debate and public outrage. A girl with a microphone stood against the backdrop of a tall building and announced the news. The results of the psychological examination of the suspect: lack of emotional reactions, lack of emotional reaction to the death of a loved one, inability to empathize with others, noticeable antisocial and violent tendencies during imprisonment. A juvenile criminal is hiding under the shield of the law. People gathered for a rally. They stood with signs and demanded to lower the age of criminal responsibility for this guy. They demanded that psychopaths and murderers be imprisoned for life. The police car with the accused was approaching. The police demanded that people leave because it was dangerous here. The protesters tried to break through the police officers. They screamed, asking how you could kill someone who cared about you without any regrets. People asked if the hero was even human. As the car passed near people, one of them threw dirt out the window. Sun Woo was shouted that he was a psychopath and a murderer who would pay for his sins. The guy calmly looked at the protesters through the stained glass of the car. People shouted and raised various posters. The man in the red band shouted for the boy to admit his sins. Sun Woo continued to look at all these people. He was calm. The boy thought that he was a psychopath and a murderer. The policeman who was driving looked at the guy through the rearview mirror. The boy turned his gaze to the man. Sun Woo's eyes sparkled and decided that since the whole world sees him like this, that's how he will live. Sister Mary's portrait stood on the altar. People in black suits attended the girl's funeral. There were many wreaths inside and outside the building. People did not understand what had happened and how the girl could leave them so suddenly. A guy in a black suit was sitting on the floor near the altar. He looked at the altar. He sadly looked at the portrait of the girl and thought about little sister Chu Young. Sister Maria was sweeping the snow from the yard. The guy in the coat waved his hand and called his sister. She turned around. The guy looked at her with a smile and called her by name Chu Young. There were 2 cups of tea on the table, steaming from them. The girl said that now the guy should call her Sister Maria. The guy was sitting at the table opposite. He closed his eyes and smiled. He said that the girl has been Chu Young's sister for him since childhood and he can't call her anything else. The girl said that she herself was not yet used to it. Chu Young sat with her eyes closed. There was a smile on her face. She said that even if she hears Sister Maria, she does not always understand that they are addressing her and sometimes it becomes very awkward. She called herself a stupid nun. The guy left. The nun kept a smile on her face. She turned to a guy named Inchol and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The girl remembered that he would soon go to college and asked if she could help him with anything. He handed her a purple box and said that he didn't need anything. The guy blushed and scratched the back of his head. He said that this was a gift for the nun and from now on he would protect Sister Maria. Sister Maria opened the box and saw a silver cross. The girl took it in her hand and examined it. She admired his beauty. The nun smiled and thanked Incheol. The image of the dead Chu Young suddenly appeared in the guy's head. He opened his eyes wide in a fit of panic. His face turned blue and covered with sweat. The guy put his hand on his leg and tried to catch his breath. A plump guy approached Incheol. He put his hand to his face. The plump one asked if Incheol was okay. He replied yes. Another guy in a black suit approached the guy. The plump guy said that the guard needed to eat. The guy who came up turned to a guy named Sanho and said that there was no time for food now. Incheol looked at the floor. Tears flowed from his eyes. He thought about what he promised his little sister to protect her. Legs in brown boots and pants entered. The man called Incheol by her full name. The guy approached Detective Cho. Incheol and Cho were sitting at the table. There was food and bottles of alcohol on the table. The detective said that first, he notified the director of the Nazareth orphanage that after the funeral the guy would take Sister Mary's personal belongings. On the table, in addition to alcohol, there was rice and meat. The detective looked away. No one was sitting at the other tables with food and alcohol. The detective told Incheol that he was glad he was here since the girl had no family. Incheol furrowed his brows. He asked what the sentence was. The man looked at his interlocutor seriously. He replied that Sun Woo was taken into custody and sent to a juvenile detention center. He added that the guy is small and this is his first attack. Cho was worried that the verdict would be like this. The man said that it seemed that the detention center had decided to take him seriously. The guy grabbed his head with his hand and looked down. He asked how long the boy would stay there. The detective said 6 months. Incheol raised his head and turned pale. He asked again. The guy was shaking with anger. He said that Sun Woo killed a man. did not admit his guilt and did not even think about what he had done. He couldn't believe such a lenient sentence. Red with anger, In-chul abruptly stood up from the table. He asked if this is how murder is punished now and said that it is not fair. Veins appeared on the guy's head and neck. The scream made saliva fly from his mouth. He said that Sister Maria's 25-year life was cut short in a second, and the killer would be released in 6 months and return to normal life. Comrades ran up to the screaming guy. One of them grabbed his hand. In-chul shouted. Tears flowed from his eyes. He turned to his Sister Maria and said that he was very sorry. He asked if it was possible to end someone's life like that. The guy fell to his knees. The detective stood up from the table and said he was sorry. The coffin with Sister Maria was placed in the crematorium oven. Through the glass one could see how he was being burned. In-chul sat on the floor of the waiting room. The guy held the box in his hands and looked into space. He opened the box containing the murdered girl's belongings. On top was a photo of her with Hee-young and Song-woo. In-chul said that he wanted Song-woo to suffer for the rest of his life. The guy's face in the photo was calm. In-chul gritted his teeth in rage. Tears flowed from his eyes. He said that he would make the boy suffer the same way he suffered, like a stake driven into his very heart. He said Young Sun-woo's name with hatred and then screamed. Children in uniform sit in the cafeteria of a juvenile detention center. Sun-woo deliberately spilled hot soup on the hand of the person sitting opposite him. He screamed in pain. A boy with his hand red from a burn sat and said that he was in pain. He asked why his neighbor did this. A man in a green jacket came up and asked the boy why he did it. The hero was silent. The man turned to the victim. He sat with a red face. The man asked if he would tell what happened. The guy was silent. The warden asked if they both wanted to be sent to a punishment cell. The victim turned away and asked again. The boy turned away and tried to hide his burnt hand. The boy was holding a red hand. He asked whether psychopaths actually enjoy the pain of others. He said that's all. 2 boys followed the warden. The victim looked at Sun-woo with fear on his face. They followed the man. Sun-woo looked ahead. He said that he now knows the answer to the victim's question. The boy didn't understand what he was talking about. The hero calmly looked at his victim. The victim looked at him with fear. He clenched his teeth in fear. Sun-woo said that it was funny for him to hear the guy screaming that he was hot. A white car was speeding through the city. The director found out that Sun-woo was sent to the punishment cell again. The woman was sitting behind the wheel of the car. She said she would come and talk to him. The nun realized that if this continued, it would affect the boy's characteristics and his term of imprisonment could also change. The woman exhaled heavily. She asked what she should do with him. The phone displayed an incoming call from Chairman Lai. The woman stopped. She answered the call. She replied that he would come from the USA. The director was sitting in the car and talking on the phone. She said that he said that his friend was a doctor who studied Sun-woo's mental state, and he was very interested in the guy's condition. The woman added that he wants to arrive by the hero's release date. The woman smiled and said that they would do so. 7 months later, an airplane flies over a Korean airport. The guard was closing the gate behind the nun and Song-woo. The woman was straightening the guy's jacket. She asked if he was cold. The director said that we needed to buy warmer things. The woman looked at the freed boy. There was a red scarf around her neck. She asked if she had told the guy yet that someone wanted to meet him. 2 men approached them. The first was a man with glasses, studying the hero's mental state. The second was a man in a scarf. He smiled. The man opened his brown eyes. He extended his hand to Sun-woo, who had his hands in his pockets. The guest said his name was Spencer Toby Kim. The boy looked at the man silently. He stood with his hand outstretched and smiled. Toby said that he really wanted to meet Song-woo. The boy thought why. A black car drove into the territory of the Nazareth shelter. The director and Sun-woo stood opposite the psychologists. Toby thanked the woman for allowing him to work with the boy. The nun put her hand on the boy's shoulder. He looked at the hand. The woman said that this is for Sun-woo's sake and this is just the beginning. The man leaned towards the hero and smiled. He told the guy that they would see each other for a consultation. Sun-woo agreed. The car drove away, and the director and Sun-woo went to the orphanage. They looked at each other. The woman said that if the guy doesn't want to, then no one is forcing him, and she will talk to the doctor. The boy looked at the nun. He asked if she wanted him to communicate with them. The woman got scared and suddenly opened her eyes. A bead of sweat ran down her face. She closed her eyes, smiled, and said that she meant that no one forces a guy to go if he doesn't want to. She also said that the boy could always politely refuse. They moved on. The director said that Sun-woo will be able to return to school in March. She told him to talk to the nuns to find out more. The director said she was already here. The boy was afraid of what he saw. He clenched his teeth. Sister Maria stood in front of him. She was the same as before. Instead of Mary, another nun appeared in front of the boy. She was wearing brown clothes and her face was stern. She introduced herself as Sister Angela. From that moment on, the boy had to obey her. The hero's face became sad and he turned away. he realized that it could not be Sister Maria. A man in a dark green coat stood near the shelter. He looked at the people leaving for the building and clenched his fist. In his thoughts he turned to the hero. He stood opposite the steps and thought. He asked Sun Woo in his head if he thought he could live in peace. Inchol looked at his feet and thought that the boy would never live in peace. He looked up angrily. Inchol decided that he would not allow him to do this. The children looked at Sun Woo as he walked behind Sister Angela. They were surprised to see the guy. The boy walked silently along the corridor. The children looked out of the room. One of the boys said that the hero had probably just left the juvenile detention center. The second could not believe that Sun Woo was returned to them in Nazareth. The boy stood in the doorway and looked at Sister Angela. The nun stood with her hands on her hips. She said that the less Sun Woo goes to class, the lower his grades will be. The girl explained that at this rate the hero would not be able to move to 5th grade. The boy was about to enter the room, but turned his head towards Sister Angela. She said that a schoolboy must study, so from now on the boy needs to focus on his studies. She added that if Sun Woo follows her principles and rules, then everything will fall into place as before. Sun Woo looked at the girl without any emotion on his face. The boy sat down on the floor near the boxes of things. He took out his small box and held it with both hands. Sun Woo took out a photo of himself with Hee Young and Sister Maria. He thought that the same as before would no longer be the case, because they were both no longer with him. The boy looked at the photograph with sad eyes. The next day the children played football. 2 boys were trying to catch a ball in the air. One of the guys hit the ball with his head. They closed their eyes. The ball rolled towards Sun Woo's feet. He picked up the ball. The hero handed it to the boy and told him to take it. The children left Sun Woo. One of the children turned around with an angry expression on his face. He refused to take the ball and said that they would rather look for another one. The hero got angry. His face turned red. He threw the ball with all his might at the head of the one who offended him. The boy leaned forward from the blow. Sun Woo went about his business while 2 guys held his victim. The guy raised his fist and shouted insults after the hero. Inchol stood nearby and watched the boy. His face was very angry and serious. He thought that the hero would regret what he did. Sun Woo walked down the street with his hands in his pocket. Inchol stood behind the hero. The boy turned around. The man asked if bullies hurt him. The hero recognized this man as the uncle of the soldier who found him and his sister Maria. He looked at the man and asked what was wrong, and then added that he had done nothing. Inchol became furious and grabbed Sun Woo by the jacket. He started shaking the guy and yelling at him. He asked if the hero had forgotten what he had done and reminded him of his sister Maria. The boy looked angrily at the offender. He asked how he could forget that they made him a criminal. The man picked up Sun Woo and continued to yell at him. Sweat dripped down the man's forehead. He claimed that the boy did it and he saw everything with his own eyes. Sun Woo said he didn't do it. The man threw the child to the ground and asked why he did this. He leaned towards the hero and grabbed the jacket again. He asked to tell him why the boy did this. Incheol's face turned red and tears started flowing from her eyes. He demanded an answer from the guy why he killed the girl. A tear flew down. Incheol held Sun Woo by the neck. The man's tears dripped onto the boy's face. He understood that his uncle was also suffering because Sister Mary was no longer in this world. The man closed his eyes, tears flowing from them. The director was sitting opposite the psychologist. The man said he was sure the woman was shocked. He said he was also surprised. 2 orphanage employees pulled Incheol away from Song-woo. The psychologist asked who could have guessed this. There was awkwardness on the director's face. She sat with her eyes closed and talked about how he visited her several times and said that he would not leave Song-woo alone. The man looked at the director with a calm expression on his face. The nun thanked him for allowing Sun Woo to stay at the doctor's house as it saved a lot of time. The interlocutor replied that there is no need to thank him and that's even good, because Dr. Tobai is interested in Sun Woo even more than him. The woman smiled and asked when the boy could return to Nazareth. She explained that she could not allow him to live with the doctor permanently, even if it would be beneficial for treatment. The man smiled too. He told the nun not to worry about it. He also said that he invited her today because he wanted to discuss something else. Large private 2-story house. Sun Woo was lying in bed near a large window. Dr. Toby asked how he was feeling. The boy looked silently at the man in the orange sweater. He was sitting on a chair nearby. The doctor asked if there was anything he wanted to do. The guy sat calmly in bed. He replied that he wanted to take revenge. Toby asked who exactly the child wants to take revenge on. Sun Woo looked at the man seriously and replied that he wanted to take revenge on the people who branded him a criminal, the soldier, and the detective. The doctor looked at the guy. He said he thought the boy had chosen the wrong targets. The man asked if Sister Maria's real killer should be the target of revenge. The boy opened his eyes wide in surprise. Dr. Toby sat on the chair with his hands clasped together. He said that if Sun Woo wants to pay back the real criminal properly, then he will be happy to help him. The boy asked how. Dr. Kim replied that he wanted to adopt a child and that is what he came for. Sun Woo and Toby stood near that same storage room. The man looked at the child and told him to do something. The boy slowly began to walk towards the pantry. He looked out the window. The boy mentally turned to his sister Maria and said that he was here to say goodbye. There was a full moon in the night sky. Sun Woo looked at the crime scene. He did not know when he would return, but he promised that he would find and punish in the same way the one who did this to her. The boy turned his head towards the trees. Sun Woo watched with his calm gaze. He said goodbye to the girl. The hero left the crime scene. A dark silhouette could be seen in the trees behind him. The hooded killer looked at the people leaving and mentally said goodbye to young Sun Woo. A smile appeared on his face. 13 years later, tall city buildings, Chicago, Illinois, United States of America. A young man in a brown coat stood and held a bag in his hands. There was a suitcase at his feet. The white car pulled up. The young man's name was Eden. Toby was looking out of the car window. He smiled and waved. The man called the guy into the car. The young man smiled and agreed. He called the doctor Dad. December 2021, South Korea. Snow is falling outside. The reporter said that since the 2000 seconds, most serial killers have been called psychopaths, and she's not sure she understands them well. Near the gate there was a sign with the inscription. The girl said that psychopaths were once called natural-born killers or emotionless monsters. She said that as an American forensic psychologist, Dr. Toby had spent a lot of time studying psychopaths. The man was sitting on a chair opposite the female reporter. They were filmed by a professional camera. The girl asked what a psychopath was. The doctor sat with one leg crossed over the other. He replied that psychopaths, like everyone else, feel certain emotions. The man said that although their range of emotions is less than that of ordinary people, calling them emotionless would be completely wrong. The operator directed the camera and monitored what was happening. Dr. Risco looked straight into the camera and said that if there was a need to describe them in one word, they were hunters. He explained that they all have the temperament of a hunter. Toby closed his eyes and raised one finger. He said that not every psychopath is a criminal, and the conclusion that a psychopath is a criminal is not always fair. The reporter looked at the doctor in surprise. He said the word psychopath is used too often in Korean society. The reporter asked if this meant there were different types of psychopathy. The girl closed her mouth and listened attentively to the doctor with a smile. Toby stated that how a person grows up depends entirely on upbringing and environment, and this is true even for people who are born with signs of psychopathy. The reporter tilted her head and asked if this meant that with the help of therapy and training, it was possible to raise a psychopath with the temperament of a hunter into a champion of justice. Dr. Toby shook his head and replied that yes, but it would be problematic to do something like that with an adult psychopath. The girl still looked at the doctor with interest. She asked what about the children. She asked whether upbringing could radically influence them and what would happen if proper efforts were made to raise such a child. She wondered if similar cases had been described. The man opened his eyes and looked at the reporter silently. He sat with his legs on top of each other. Toby laughed and said that he thought the girl herself knew how difficult it was to find such studies. The reporter said that the man was right and it was very difficult to find such exceptional cases. The man looked at her. He said that the question posed was interesting to him too. Toby asked whether a psychopathic child with the instincts of a hunter, raised with love and care, and undergone training designed to eradicate innate instincts, could control his emotions. Eden licked the ice cream. The boy and Dr. Toby were sitting on a park bench. They looked at other children playing on the playground. The man put his hand on his adopted son's shoulder. The hero was stretching during training, and the doctor was sitting and meditating. The son did his homework under the supervision of his father. Dr. Toby looked into the camera and asked if such a child could become a champion of justice. Main Police Academy. Shooting range number 1. The hero takes aim to fire a revolver. The weapon jumps when fired. Eden stands without taking his eyes off the target. Smoke comes out of the revolver. The young man took the target into his hands. He looks at the target and sees that all the shots hit the head. Another member of the academy sees the hero's hits. He opens his mouth in surprise and calls the guy an artist. Water is pouring from the shower. The guy lists what they usually do. Students are standing under the shower. The guy tells Eden that he's good at everything, and then asks if there's anything he can't do. The young man stood under the stream of water with his eyes closed. The person standing next to him did not stop talking. He said that he thought that forensic psychologists did not know which side to take up the weapon, but the hero turned out to be a sniper. Eden replied that forensic psychologists are cops too. He opened his eyes and said that you need to be prepared for anything. A guy with an athletic build was happily drying himself with a towel. He said that it seemed like nerds were really wired differently. Eden said that the fact is that his father taught him to shoot since childhood. The hero wrapped himself in a white towel. The athletic young man looked at him and said that he had heard that he had also come to Korea. He said he thought forensic psychologists had more work and prospects in the States. The guy added that the hero renounced American citizenship and returned to Korea and then asked why. The hero began to walk. He looked at his friend in the mirror and could not answer right away. Eden looked away and said that he came to Korea to find someone. The guy turned his head and said that he was an adopted child. The comrade got excited. Sweat appeared on his face and he tried to say something. He did not expect such an answer. The guy lowered his head and awkwardly said that he understood. The hero thought that now his comrade thought that his excessive curiosity had affected the young man's feelings. The young man stood and rubbed his neck with his hand. He apologized to Eden. The guy thought that one moment is a huge variety of human feelings that are not like his. The hero turned around and looked at the upset one. The young man closed his eyes and smiled. The young man raised his finger and awkwardly said that the hero should not worry, since he would not tell anyone. Eden replied that he hoped so. The guy turned away and headed towards the locker. The hero thought that now he was trying to make amends for the stupid question with his care. The young man turned to the mirror. Something told him that this man wouldn't be asking personal questions anytime soon. The hero stood in front of the mirror with a smile and closed eyes. He opened his eyes and the smile instantly disappeared from his face. The guy looked at his reflection. His eyes showed determination. He told his sister that he had returned. The image of Sister Maria appeared behind the hero's back. The start. August 2022. Night City. The legs ran quickly along the street. A red-haired guy dressed like the killer of Sister Maria was running away from his pursuer. He turned around in fear. Beads of sweat ran down his face. He asked if the pursuer had fallen behind. The guy ran into the yard and began to regain his breathing. He said he was so fast. A shadow appeared from behind the house and asked what he had just been called. Inchil ran out from around the corner. The guy fell from fright. A man with long dark hair and stubble stood over the guy. He was holding handcuffs in his hand. He asked if he was a worm. Then who is this guy? The man handcuffed the guy's hands. He said he is a law-abiding student. The person who caught him said the juvenile offender has 28 criminal charges. They headed towards the exit from the yard. The student turned to the man and said that he would still be released under the juvenile protection law. Inchol answered the boy that even if he is very busy, he should not forget about his own birthday. They approached a black car. The young man asked what birthday we were talking about. The man replied that the guy had recently turned 14. He looked at the criminal and twirled his finger and then said that this law no longer applied to him. Fear appeared on the criminal's face. A drop of sweat flowed from his forehead. They threw him into the back seat of the car. He indignantly asked to be easier with him. Inchol got into the car and started jotting down something on his notepad. He crossed out the names of criminals, their dates of birth and crimes. Police department the next day. Detective Gan was asked how many times this happens. He was asked why he constantly acts on his own, also in a case that is not in his jurisdiction. Inchol lowered his head and scratched the back of his head. The man in the suit told him not to tell him that it was because he couldn't catch that kid. The policeman replied that he had received a message from the previous department. He bowed before the chiefs as a sign of apology. The boss shouted for Inchol to get out there. The man apologized. The boss handed him an envelope. The policeman was surprised. The man put his head on his fist and closed his eyes. He said that a request came from the HR department and he is temporarily transferring Inchol to them. Wan District Police Station. The man was standing in front of the police station. The chief said that as soon as you assign a police officer to someone's team, people feel really bad. They want to get rid of the man quickly. The detective looked at the top of the building. In his head there was a request from the boss to work there until Inchol was appointed a new partner. The man said about the investigation team from the USA. On the table was a framed photo of Dr. Toby and Eden in police uniform. There was a knock on the door. Inchol asked if this was a criminal investigation. The hero turned around, sitting on the chair. The man was standing at the door. The girl was looking at him. He said hello and asked if this was a criminal investigation. The girl asked if he was Detective Gunn and said that she was informed about his arrival today. The man looked away and scratched the back of his head. He said his name was Gang Inchol. The girl smiled and extended her hand. She introduced herself as Chief Inspector Mo Yejin, head of the criminal investigation team. They shook hands. The hero looked at the newcomer and recognized him as a soldier from his childhood. Yejin stood and spread her arms. She talked about how this special team was formed to investigate the crimes of serial killer Kai Chun-bi. The inspector added that despite the fact that the statute of limitations on this case has expired, the investigation has not been closed and their superiors are awaiting results from them. The girl turned and showed her place of work with her hand. She said that as a man, she knows that there are not very many people willing to work on such cases. Yejin turned to the other employees and pointed at Inchol. She said that from this day on he will join their team. Inchol shook the hero's hand. The man introduced himself by his name. The hero introduced himself as Corporal Kim Eden. The guy thought that they had not seen each other for a long time. He looked at the man with a calm gaze and thought whether he was a good or bad cop. Chol grimaced his face, looking at the hero. He didn't understand what this familiar feeling of discomfort was. Eden's face, as usual, showed no emotion. For him now everything has fallen into place and he has finally returned. Korean airports. The hero asked if this should be the feeling when you return home after a long absence. The entrance to the restaurant was painted red. The doctor suggested yes. Eden looked at the men and said that he had discovered something that he had forgotten about. The doctor with glasses abruptly put his hands on the table and leaned over. He asked if it was true and then said that the hero was excited. Toby asked if something happened. The young man sat with his eyes closed and smiled. The father turned to his friend. A friend said that Toby was too panicky and suggested that his father with overprotective syndrome should return to America. The man asked where his friend saw the overprotection and said that he was exaggerating again. The guy opened his eyes and looked at the men. He said that there were actually some things that really bothered him. The psychologist simultaneously looked at Eden. Toby asked if the man was bothering his adopted son. He looked at Dad and said yes. The young man said that he was not sure of his feelings and for him this man was either a random tramp or a wolf thirsty for his blood. The man looked at his son with concern and asked about the wolf. The uncle made a pistol with his finger and aimed at Eden. He said that then you need to attack first. The father looked at this with some excitement. The guy closed his eyes and began to spread his hands as a sign of disagreement. The man looked at Toby. The hero said that Dad would worry about him again. Then he turned to his comrade and said that Eden would be okay. He wanted to add something about the past, but didn't finish. The hero put his hand on his father's hand, smiled and told him not to worry, and this wouldn't happen again. Toby looked at his son warily. He turned his head. The hero looked at him with a serious face. The guy thought that firstly, he needed to set his priorities and nothing should stand in the way of his justice. The hero does not know what will happen after. The house wherein Chol lives. The man, yawning, went outside. He saw a white sports car parked in front of the house. The hero looked at him from the car window. He told Detective Gunn to get in. The detective was surprised when he saw Corporal Eden. The man sat in the front seat and fastened his seatbelt. He said he received a call from Team Captain Mo. Chol asked how far away the crime scene was that they had to get up so early. The man looked at the driver in surprise. Eden said the crime scene is in Dawson City, Name County. The detective looked at the hero. He held the steering wheel with both hands. The young man asked what was wrong. Chol replied that this is the first time he has seen an officer go to a crime scene in this form. The guy smiled slightly and said that the man had a not very confident tone. Afterwards he added that he also saw some things for the first time. He turned his head and looked at the flustered Chol. Eden said it was the first time he had seen a detective openly express dislike for his colleague. The man replied that this was not so. There was a glove compartment in front of Chol. Eden asked to open it. The detective opened the glove compartment. Inside was a black folder. The guy said that the man needed to get acquainted with the case. The hero looked at the road, and Chol looked irritably at the folder. He thought that meant he should shut up and read the case. It was a missing person case. The file stated that the college student disappeared in Name County on August 11, 2000. The detective threw the folder back into the glove compartment. Eden said this was their team's first case. The man leaned on the back of the chair, raised his head and put his hands behind it. The hero asked if Chol was going to read the file. He replied that he was not fully awake yet. The man tilted his seat into a reclining position and closed his eyes. He said he couldn't concentrate on reading in a moving car. Eden replied that he understood. He lay with his eyes closed and said that he would look at the papers later. Chol asked Corporal Kim to explain the matter in general terms, because this way he would dive into it faster. The guy silently turned away from the detective, who told him to look at the road while he was driving. Chol told the hero to start talking when he is ready. A girl in a yellow t-shirt was walking along the road. The victim, identified as Park So-yeon, is 21 years old. She is a college student. Eden mentally appeared behind the victim. The girl went to college in a nearby area. During the holidays I came to my parents' house in the countryside. There were small stone buildings along the road. The victim's parents lived in a typical small village. The girl's old mother was holding her back. She said that she had not seen her daughter for a long time. The girl greeted her mother. In such villages, residents always notice strangers. Mom left and waved to her daughter. The daughter waved back. The woman said it was time for her to go. The girl asked her mother to call her when she got there. A few days later, Park So-yeon's mother went on a trip with her friends and her daughter disappeared that same day. The girl's hand took a bottle of juice. So-yeon walked out of the store with the package and wished the clerk a good day. The estimated time of disappearance was 4 p.m. when she left the local supermarket. A hand inserted the key into the door lock. Park Sung-young's father came home around 9 p.m. A man with a bottle in his hands took off his shoes. The next morning, the police searched Park So-yeon's room but found nothing unusual, so the runaway theory was rejected. The room was tidy. There was a fan hanging on the wall. There was juice left in the white glass. There were also no signs of forced entry into the house. The police examined the windows and doors. Eden stood at the light switch in the room. He pressed the switch. On the corner of the chest of drawers they found traces of blood that belonged to the missing girl. The blood was found using ultraviolet light. Chol sat and read the file. He said that meant someone had wiped away her blood. Eden continued to look at the road. He said a police investigation concluded it could have been a kidnapping or murder. Chol continued the hero's thought and said that in the end the victim was never found, and the only suspect was her father. An elderly man in a white t-shirt stood in front of the door. The man had many wrinkles on his face. The detective studied the case carefully. Eden looked at him out of the corner of his eye. The man said that the police could not find any evidence of his guilt. He turned to the hero and asked why they reopened the investigation into this case. Eden looked at the man. He was familiar with that expression. The corporal began to look at the road again. Chol started reading the file again. He asked whether the hero would tell him or not. There was a mark on the glass. Eden said a partial fingerprint was found on a glass in the victim's room. Chol looked at his partner with enthusiasm. The guy said that at that time it was difficult to determine who the print belonged to. The detective again continued his thought and said that today it is possible. He raised his fist in front of him and closed his eyes. The man said that if they find the criminal, they might be able to find the victim. Eden wondered if this man was really a detective. Namhyun Police Station. Fingerprint analysis takes place on a computer. Eden watches the process from the side. It's exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Chol is sitting on a chair, and Eden is leaning against the wall. The man looks ahead irritably. The hero observes the analysis. The detective said it would have to wait. The young man said that they would have to wait longer than usual, since they were told that something did not add up. The door opened slightly, and Chol shouted at the hero. He demanded to tell him something he didn't know. A voice from the office said that the results were ready. The partners looked at the man with papers about the results. He said there was no match, and Chol stood and grinned in irritation. Eden calmly asked if all the prints had been checked. The man gave the hero the results and said that they had checked everything. Among those tested were the victim herself, other family members, and even those who were involved in the case as witnesses. They checked everyone, but found no matches. The hero realized that the owner of the fingerprint was not among these people. A smile appeared on Eden's face, and Chol looked around. The young man happily looked at the results and said that this meant that there was someone else who had escaped the gaze of the police. The detective looked at the hero with horror. The police were carrying evidence down the corridor, and Chol told the man who was walking next to him to run prints on the bases while he examined the scene. He added that it would be good to meet their owner face to face as soon as possible. The man replied that he understood. 2 blue boxes were in the trunk of Eden's car. The hero closed the trunk, and Chol stood nearby. He asked if the guy thought from the beginning that Park So-yeon's father was innocent. The young man turned and replied that no. It just seemed to him that the probability was extremely low. Eden got behind the wheel and began to close the door. An angry Chol headed towards the door and shouted that he said so. The guy replied that not really. The man looked angrily at the corporal and said that now he definitely understood his style, and let it be not quite. He asked what the young man was leaning on. The car drove into the parking lot of the police station. Eden said that if Park So-yeon's father had been the culprit, he would have tried to flee the scene, but he stayed. Chol asked what this meant. The corporal remembered the victim's shoes. Pink sneakers were on the floor. A bead of sweat ran down the man's face. He remembered that in the evidence, in addition to a glass of juice, there were pink sneakers. Eden turned the steering wheel. He said that if the father was a criminal, he would have removed the shoes and then the police would have to figure out whether Park So-yeon was missing or ran away. The guy said that this option would be beneficial to my father. Chol said that then it would be too difficult to determine the crime scene, since there is too little blood in the house and people don't die from that. He turned away from the driver. Eden said the victim's father was considered the prime suspect because his official return home time was 9 p.m. and he stayed home until about 9 a.m. the next day. The guy explained that the problem was that there was no one to confirm his alibi. Chol said that his father had plenty of time to get rid of his shoes if he wanted to. The man looked forward. He said that if he had gotten rid of the shoes, there would have been no need to call the police the next day. The detective added that the father could have denied everything and pretended that he thought that the girl had gone away or stayed with a friend for a long time. The guy looked at his partner and said that he was right. He said that it turns out that nothing went missing during the night, and the likelihood that Park So-yeon simply left wearing different shoes is also small. Eden concluded that the perpetrator left behind the shoes. The partners raced along the road, and Chol said that in other words, there must be a reason why the criminal could not remove the shoes. The guy agreed and said that he thought he could give an answer at the crime scene. Chol looked over the fence and Eden looked at the gate. An elderly man appeared behind them. He asked if he had called them, and Chol looked at the bald man with the key. He said that now there is no one here and the owner lives in another place, but he will not sell this house until he finds his daughter. Eden stood and looked around the yard. He said that before there was no fence or gate here, therefore, step outside the door and you are in full view of everyone. The guy looked at the house, near which the woman was digging in the ground. He said that a person could be seen here by random passers-by or neighbors looking out the window. And Chol looked at the distant fence and greenhouse. He said that the police therefore decided that the perpetrator must be either a family member or an acquaintance. The older man raised his finger and asked what the detectives were thinking. It seemed to him that they wanted to inspect the house itself. Eden looked around the backyard. He thought that the house behind him was very close and seemed to have been built relatively recently. The hero looked at the two-story house behind the fence. An elderly man said that there used to be a factory there, but it was rebuilt about 5 years ago. The man stood and smiled. He held his hands behind his back. The corporal asked him what kind of factory there used to be. The man replied that there was a small furniture factory there that produced cabinets, chests of drawers, tables, and all that. The guy looked over. Eden and Chol looked at the building behind the fence. The man said that when there was no fence, getting here was easy. The partner replied that if there was a back door here, it would be possible to get in and out unnoticed. A scream was heard from the house, calling the police here. An elderly man opened the door and said that if you open it, there is a very good breeze. He added that in the summer you can even do without a fan. Eden walked inside with Chol following behind him. The guy asked if this door is usually open in the summer. The man replied yes. The door from the pantry led to the kitchen. The house was clean. The kitchen had cabinets with blue doors. The hero looked out the window and named the date the crime was committed. The neighboring house was visible from the window. The guy said that the view was completely different then. He said that from the window he could see a furniture factory. The hero presented the image of a criminal waving out the window. Eden looked around the kitchen. The criminal came out of the storeroom. The guy thought that the criminal entered the house through the back door and headed to Park So-yeon's room. Detectives moved to the victim's room. Eden imagined the criminal drinking from a glass. He thought that the victim was in no hurry, which means that Park So-yeon herself let him into the house. An elderly man stood at the door and held his hands behind his back. Eden put his hands on his hips and wondered what happened. Something caught the guy's attention. He noticed something on the nightstand. Eden approached her and began to examine her. He said it was interesting. Chol looked in the same direction as his partner. He couldn't believe what he saw. The elderly man asked what they found again. The hero removed the handles from the cabinets. He looked at them and said that he had found the last piece of the puzzle. Eden put the evidence in a bag and ran to the car. He shouted that he would hand over everything to the boss. The man looked at Chol. He said that the stepfather had been cleared of all charges, and then asked why they were investigating again. The detective asked where the victim's parents lived. The old man looked at Chol. A bead of sweat ran down his face. He said that the husband was to blame, since he immediately left after divorcing the girl's mother. At night they arrived at the Chuan National Police Agency. Chol did not believe what he was told about 1297 people. The detectives were in the office. Eden stood at the board. The rest were sitting at the table. The man said that the print left behind is less than a centimeter, which is why there are so many matches. Chol repeated the number given to him. The hero turned to the detectives and began to point his finger at the board. The details of the investigation were listed on the board. The youth said the suspect was an employee who worked in a furniture factory behind the house. He said the suspect was able to easily get close to Park So-yeon, who had been away from home for a long time. The guy continued talking. He said that the man knew Park So-yeon personally and was probably on friendly terms with her before. Victim's room. Glass with juice. The hero suggested that the suspect is the same age as Park So-yeon. After inspecting the house, the detective put forward a thesis. The criminal entered Park So-yeon's house under the pretext of repairing the chest of drawers. Dresser handles. Stone building. Hero said that the suspect communicated with the girl, mainly in the backyard, near the furniture factory, since there used to be no fence there. Eden said the suspect knew that the victim's mother was traveling, and very likely knew what time Park So-yeon's father usually returned home. The detectives looked at Eden. The young man pointed his finger at a photo of the victim's pink sneakers. He said police's initial theory was that the girl disappeared between 4 and 9 p.m. The hero said that the reason why the criminal left the shoes is because he did not use the front entrance, but used the back one. The silhouette of the suspect walked past the main entrance. Eden stated that the criminal did not think about the shoes, since they were not visible from the kitchen and Park So-yeon's room. White work gloves lay on the chest of drawers near the glass. The corporal said that there were no traces of the criminal's presence, minus the glass cup, since the furniture factory worker wore gloves and did not even have to cover his tracks. The guy continued talking and said that the criminal had to take off his gloves briefly when they brought him the juice. Eden calmly looked at his colleagues and stated that the criminal was not so meticulous as to get rid of all traces of his presence, but he was just lucky. Yejin looked at the hero with encouragement and said that if that's the case, then it's time to put an end to his luck. The girl abruptly placed both hands on the table and ordered Sergeant Gosson to cross-examine the people who had been fingerprinted and the furniture factory workers. He was also required to check the traces left at the crime scene. The three detectives looked at Yejin. She ordered Corporal Kim and Investigator Kang to determine his address and travel routes as soon as the suspect was identified. Everyone responded in unison by accepting orders. The men continued to look at Yejin. She turned to Miss So-yeon and said that they would definitely catch the culprit. It was 6 o'clock on the clock. Investigator Khan found something. The heroes turned to the man sitting at the computer. He said part of the fingerprint, gender, footprints, age and work address matched. Inchol read Baek Jin-gi's name. The computer had all the information about the person. He was born in 1979. The detective said he was 22 years old at the time of the incident and his name was never listed in the investigation. Yejin looked at her subordinates and ordered to find out the reason why he was not under investigation and check him. She wanted to say what would happen if they found someone else connected with Park So-yeon, but she didn't have time to finish. Investigator Khan looked at the monitor. He said Baek Jin-gi is in prison and has been accused of sexual assault in the past. Yejin and Inchol looked at the monitor. The investigator added that the suspect is currently serving a sentence of 2 years and 3 months in Chuan prison for common theft. Inchol said that the prison is not far from them. Eden looked at his watch and began to deny something. His colleagues looked at him questioningly. Sentencing end date, September 15, 2022. The young man said that Jingy was there an hour ago. A dented juice box. The man drank juice from a straw. Jingy sat down on a chair and talked about how he hadn't done something for a long time. He crouched and looked to the side. Eden and Inchol walked around the office while the police examined the camera footage. The man said that the suspect's place of residence is unknown and if he goes to the bottom, he will not be found. Eden told the officer to stop recording. The camera was pointed directly at Jingy. Inchol asked if the hero found him. The partner replied that he had found it, and he was wearing the same clothes in which he left prison. The man was looking at something. The heroes did not understand what he was looking at. He looked at the sign for Chuan bus terminal. Eden looked at the screen. The recording was made 2 hours ago. The partners drove towards the terminal. Inchol said that he was looking at the reservation in the direction of Namhyun. The man was sitting in the passenger seat and conducting a search through a laptop. He said that there were 3 hours left before Baek Jin-gi arrived at the stop. Manager Mo was on speakerphone. She replied that they should try to apprehend Jingy when they arrived. Inchol turned to Eden. He offered to arrest him right at the bus stop. The guy was not distracted from the road. He said that Namhyun is far from the prison, but nevertheless, he went there immediately after his release. The young man said that perhaps this place was psychologically important for the criminal, and suggested that his hideout was there. Chief Mo and Investigator Kang were sorting through documents. The man said that Jinga's father had been dead for a long time, and his mother now did not live in Namhyun. He said that there is no confirmed information that he has relatives or close acquaintances there. The woman agreed and said that the theory has a right to life, but it is all too imprecise, so for now they will simply establish surveillance of the suspect. There was calm on Eden's face. He said that when a person deliberately commits murder, he hides the body in some well-known place. He said criminals always do this. The guy continued talking and said that Park So-yeon lived in Namhyun, a place that would be close to Jingy geographically or psychologically. Yejin stood and rubbed her chin. Investigator Khan said that criminals sense the police very well, and they need to be careful. The girl told the man not to worry. Inchol became serious. He said that he worked as a policeman for many years, and during these years not a single criminal escaped from him. He told the manager that he would not stop until he caught him, because this is what he lives for. Inchol picked up the phone. He said that this all sounded very confident, and besides, Jingy did not know that he was being followed. The man added that they will have to take risks as they cannot miss the opportunity to find Park So-yeon. The investigator looked at the leader and asked what they would do. He said that even if they start preparing right now, they still won't make it in time. The woman looked forward. She agreed and told Eden and Inchol to go after Baek Jin-gi and they would arrive as soon as possible. The detective raised his fist happily. The car was racing along the highway. The bus with the suspect was driving along the highway. Young people were having fun on the beach. Jingy looked at this on the screen in the transport. He grimaced his face with pleasure and scared the girl next to him. He really liked what he saw. The bus arrived at the terminal. Door opened. Jingy went outside and reached up. He looked at the city and the bus leaving. The man said that nothing has changed here. The suspect got into the taxi. While driving, Inchol asked if he would take the homicide detective. Eden looked at him from behind. The man turned his gaze in his direction. The guy said that any passerby would immediately understand that he was a detective. The taxi driver looked at the navigator. He called number 44 and asked if they should go towards Changnam Mountain. The passenger answered hesitantly and explained that he was going to a friend's house, so he didn't quite know how everything worked here. He collapsed in the back seats. The driver turned out to be a girl. She said they were leaving. Jingy looked at the driver and smiled madly. He thought about how lucky he was. The cars were driving along the night highway. The taxi drove into the forest. The driver said that this seems to be the only road to Changnam Mountain and it will end soon. Eden asked why they stood up. A black taxi car stopped nearby. Inchul said that they will rise when they are sure that Beak Jingy has landed. He turned off the headlights. The detective watched what was happening. He said the culprit should have left by now. The light blinded Inchul. The car was driving down the mountain. The car passed in front of them without a passenger. The detective decided that the criminal had left. He was about to change gear, but Corporal Kim grabbed his arm. The guy looked in the rearview mirror. He said that the driver of that car was Beak Jingy. The silhouette of the criminal appeared in the driver's seat. Realization appeared in the detective's eyes. He quickly turned back. A black taxi car followed Jingy. The man saw in the rearview mirror that he was being followed. He didn't understand what it was. Inchul crashed into the criminal's car. He hit his forehead on the steering wheel. Jingy, with a bloody forehead, got out of the car and looked at the one who had crashed. He began pounding on the window of the black car and shouting insults. The door suddenly opened and the man fell to the ground. Standing over Jingy was the massive Inchul. The disgruntled criminal asked what was wrong with the man. Inchul glared at Jingy and asked if he was okay. The criminal looked at the man with excitement. He realized that something was wrong here. He stood up and told the man to drive straight ahead next time. Inchul asked Jingy if he would just leave. The criminal began to walk away, and the detective extended his hand towards him. He asked to at least let him apologize. Jingy ran and said he would just go. The detective smiled in anticipation of the chase. He shouted at him not to be offended now. Inchul jumped on the fleeing criminal from behind.